Have you ever felt that icy knot of dread tighten in your stomach when you open a plain brown envelope from the Department of Veterans Affairs? It's not the standard benefit letter. It's not the usual appointment reminder. It's a formal request for updated information, a notice of proposed adverse action, or worse, a letter stating they are reviewing your current disability status. And the kicker? You didn't ask for it. You didn't trigger it. It just started. This is the silent alarm of the VA system, the unannounced review process that can feel like an ambush, threatening the stability you fought so hard to achieve. For many veterans, the VA review process is a known hurdle, something you prepare for when you file a new claim. But what about the ones that kick off without warning, the ones that start because of an invisible trigger deep within the bureaucratic machine? That's what we need to unpack today. We're going to dive deep into the 7 hidden mechanisms, the subtle shifts in data, and the overlooked milestones that can instantly launch a full-scale review of your benefits, often without a single courtesy call or clear explanation. Understanding these triggers is your first and most vital defense against the anxiety and potential financial disruption that these sudden reviews can cause. This isn't just about paperwork, it's about protecting your peace of mind and the compensation you rely on. The first and perhaps most insidious trigger is what I call the silent audit, when routine. Data matching flags your file. You might think your VA file exists in isolation, a neatly sealed document only accessed when you or your representative initiates action. That belief is dangerously outdated. We live in an age of interconnected federal databases, and the VA is constantly running sophisticated algorithms that cross-reference your records with information held by other government agencies. Think of the Internal Revenue Service, IRS, the Social Security Administration, SSA, and even the Department of Defense, DoD. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is standard operating procedure designed to prevent fraud and ensure accuracy, but its side effect is often the initiation of unrequested reviews. Imagine the VA system performing a continuous, passive scan. It's looking for discrepancies. Did the SSA report a significant change in your income that might affect a non-service-connected pension? Did the DoD report a change in your retired pay status that needs to be offset against your VA compensation? These silent audits happen monthly, sometimes weekly, across millions of veteran files. When the algorithm identifies a mismatch, even a tiny one, perhaps a date of dependency status that doesn't align perfectly, it doesn't send you a friendly email asking for clarification. It often automatically queues your file for human review, and that is the moment the clock starts ticking on your unannounced review. The VA employee pulling your file isn't starting from scratch. They are starting with a red flag already attached, a predetermined suspicion that something in your record is out of sync with another federal agency's data. This deep dive data matching is particularly aggressive when it comes to income, especially for veterans receiving needs-based benefits like the non-service-connected pension or aid and attendance. If the IRS reports a higher adjusted gross income than the VA has on file for the previous year, the system assumes an oversight or a failure to report. The immediate result is a request for complex financial documentation delivered via certified mail, demanding a response within a tight window. Failing to understand that this review was triggered by an invisible computer match and not a human decision can lead to panic. The key is recognizing that these audits are systemic, and the best defense is absolute, meticulous consistency across all your federal reporting, ensuring that the VA and the IRS see the exact same financial picture every single time. This consistency must extend beyond primary income. It includes investment dividends, rental income, and even significant gifts that might cross reporting thresholds. The silent audit is relentless because it's automated, and it never sleeps. It is a continuous digital eye watching for the slightest flicker of inconsistency in the vast ocean of government data. And when it sees that flicker, your file is pulled out of the queue and thrust into the spotlight of a formal, unrequested Examination. The complexity escalates when the veteran has multiple streams of income or receives benefits from several sources, creating more data points for the algorithms to compare and potentially misinterpret. Every transaction reported to the government is a breadcrumb leading the VA's automated system back to your file. And if those breadcrumbs lead to a different conclusion than the VA currently holds, the review process begins instantly without so much as a polite notification that the system is running a comparison check. This quiet initiation is why many veterans feel completely blindsided, receiving a request for documentation they didn't realize they needed to update, all because a computer program decided their file needed a closer look based on a cross-agency data pool. Moving swiftly to the second major trigger, we encounter the medical milestone. Age, condition improvement, or scheduled re-exams, C&P. Unlike the silent audit, this trigger is built directly into your disability rating decision. But veterans often forget the specific language or the timeline set forth years earlier. When the VA grants service connection for a condition, they classify it based on its likelihood of improving. If your condition is static, meaning it's permanent and unlikely to change, you might be assigned a P&T, permanent and total rating, which generally shields you from routine future examinations. But if your condition is classified as non-static, the VA has essentially pre-scheduled a future review date. The VA often sets reevaluation dates for conditions that are expected to stabilize or improve over time, such as certain musculoskeletal injuries, mental health conditions early in treatment, or conditions affecting younger veterans. The trigger is the arrival of that predetermined date in the VA's internal system. Say you were rated 5 years ago for a knee injury with a mandatory re-examination scheduled for the 60-month mark. As that 60th month approaches, the VA system automatically generates the paperwork for a new compensation and pension, C&P, exam. You might have forgotten the exact date, but the computer hasn't. The resulting letter requesting you schedule a C&P exam for reevaluation is the start of an unrequested review process. Furthermore, certain age thresholds are automatic triggers. While the VA's 55-year rule offers some protection against routine re-exams, reaching other milestones, particularly those associated with specific medical conditions like heart disease or certain cancers, can prompt an internal review of your file to ensure the rating still accurately reflects the severity of the condition at this new stage of life. The VA is obligated to ensure that benefits are current and accurate, and age-related physiological changes are considered a valid reason for a systemic check. This is not about suspicion, it's about bureaucratic diligence. If you receive a letter demanding you attend a C&P exam and you haven't filed a new claim, check your original rating decision. The date for this review was likely set in stone the day you received that initial rating. The unexpected nature comes from the passage of time. 5 or 10 years can easily erase the memory of a mandated future review. The key defense here is proactive record keeping. Keep a copy of your initial rating decision and highlight any language regarding future examinations or mandatory review dates. When those dates approach, start preparing your updated medical evidence. Before the VA sends the notification demonstrating that your condition has either remained the same or worsened, effectively controlling the narrative of the unrequested review rather than reacting to it. The sheer volume of veterans undergoing these periodic reviews means that the VA relies heavily on automation to generate these requests, often leading to form letters that lack the specific context of why the review is happening now. Further, increasing veteran anxiety. It is essential to understand that the VA views these scheduled re-exams not as punitive actions, but as necessary quality control, ensuring that public funds are correctly distributed based on current medical reality. Ignoring the preset review date, even if it feels arbitrary or unnecessary, is a critical mistake, as failure to attend a mandated re-examination can lead to the outright suspension of benefits until compliance is met, turning a routine, administrative checkpoint into a financial crisis. The complexity of the VA's review cycle is often compounded by the fact that different conditions have different statutory review periods. Some are 2 years, others 5, and some have no mandatory period but are subject to random sampling. Next up, we have Beat On, the income discrepancy bomb, specifically targeting pension and aid and attendance recipients. While the silent audit, Trigger 1, focuses on broad federal data matching, the income discrepancy bomb is a focused attack on the specific financial requirements of needs-based programs. VA pension, non-service connected, and aid and attendance benefits are fundamentally dependent on the veteran or surviving spouse demonstrating specific financial limitations. This means the VA requires annual reporting of your net worth and income. However, the unexpected review often starts not because you failed to report, but because the reported income suddenly deviates wildly from the previous year, or because the VA receives conflicting information from a third party. Consider a surviving spouse receiving pension benefits. They diligently report their modest income annually. Then, they inherit a substantial sum of money or sell a piece of property. Even if they intended to report this change on their next annual eligibility verification report, EVR, the sheer volume of the transaction might trigger an immediate, unscheduled review. Banks, title companies, and investment firms often have reporting requirements when large sums change hands, and while they might not report directly to the VA, that data often flows through intermediary federal systems, like the IRS, that the VA can access. If the VA sees a massive unexpected deposit or asset change, the system flags the file instantly, assuming the veteran may no longer meet the net worth threshold for eligibility. The review process is initiated to determine if an overpayment has occurred or if the veteran should be immediately disqualified. What makes this a bomb is the speed and severity of the VA's reaction. Unlike a routine clarification, an income discrepancy review often includes a proposal to reduce or terminate benefits immediately, placing the burden of proof squarely on the veteran to demonstrate that the funds have been properly handled, e.g., spent down on permissible expenses like medical care, or that the asset does not count toward the net worth limit. The suddenness of this review is terrifying because it strikes at the core financial safety net. To mitigate this, veterans receiving needs-based benefits must adopt a mindset of continuous reporting, not just annual reporting. If a significant financial event occurs, an inheritance, a large sale, or a major investment shift, report it to the VA immediately, even if the annual EVR is months away. Providing the context up front, rather than waiting for the VA's automated system to flag the change and initiate a potentially hostile review, dramatically improves the outcome. This level of proactive financial transparency is the only way to defuse the income discrepancy bomb before it detonates. Furthermore, the rules regarding what constitutes countable income and net worth for pension purposes are Byzantine, involving complex calculations for unreimbursed medical expenses, UME. A sudden review might focus on whether the veteran's UME documentation is robust enough to offset the income spike, demanding an immediate, comprehensive audit of years of medical receipts and payments. The VA's internal processing speed, which is usually glacial, accelerates dramatically when potential overpayments or eligibility issues are detected, turning a slow administrative process into a high-stakes, rapid-fire demand for documentation that many veterans are ill-prepared to provide instantly. Our fourth major trigger is the sensitive issue of SPART. The dependent status shift, marriage, divorce, or children aging out. VA compensation rates are heavily influenced by the number of recognized dependents attached to the veteran's file. Changes in dependent status are mandatory reporting events, but the unrequested review often starts when the VA discovers the change through external sources before the veteran reports it. Let's look at two common scenarios. First, divorce. When a divorce is finalized, the veteran may update their status on other federal forms, like tax forms or state records. If the VA's data matching system, Trigger 1 again but focused here on familial status, cross-references your file with a state-level registry or an SSA update that shows a change in marital status, the system instantly flags your file. The VA's automated response is not to confirm the change, it's to initiate a review to determine the exact date the dependent status ended. Calculate any potential overpayment because you were receiving benefits for a dependent who was no longer legally recognized, and adjust your compensation rate downwards. This review starts without warning because the VA is prioritizing the cessation of potentially incorrect payments. The second scenario involves children. Children are generally considered dependents until age 18 or 23 if attending an approved educational institution. The VA keeps track of birth dates. As soon as a dependent child approaches the 18th or 23rd birthday milestone, the system automatically initiates a review. If the veteran has not filed the required paperwork to continue benefits past 18, AEG for a disabled child, or provided proof of enrollment past 18 for a student, the VA assumes the dependency has ended. The review process begins with a proposal to remove that dependent, which, while predictable, often catches veterans off guard because the paperwork request arrives precisely when they are busy with graduation or college applications. The key takeaway is that the VA treats dependency changes as financial events requiring immediate attention. The unexpected nature of this review often stems from the VA's assumption that the veteran is intentionally delaying reporting the change. To avoid this, treat every major life event involving family status, marriage, divorce, birth, death, or a child reaching a milestone age, as an immediate reporting requirement to the VA, not a task to be deferred until the next annual update. The complexity of these reviews is heightened when there are multiple dependent children, especially if they are attending different types of educational institutions, requiring specific, nuanced verification forms from each school. Furthermore, in cases of divorce, the VA might request copies of the divorce decree to determine if any court orders affect how the benefits should be managed, adding a layer of legal scrutiny to an already stressful administrative process. The VA's urgency in these matters is driven by the fact that improper dependency payments are one of the most common sources of VA debt, and the system is designed to preempt this debt accumulation by initiating a swift, unannounced investigation upon detecting a status change in external records. Now, let's discuss the trigger that is the most difficult to predict and the most emotionally taxing. The whistleblower or anonymous tip. The most unexpected trigger. Most VA reviews are initiated by data or internal schedules, but occasionally the process begins because of an external human intervention, a tip, a complaint, or a piece of information submitted by a third party. This could come from a former spouse, an estranged family member, a disgruntled neighbor, or even an employer. While the VA cannot initiate action based solely on an unsubstantiated rumor, any specific credible allegation of fraud, noncompliance, or a significant change in the veteran's condition or living situation must be investigated. The VA has established protocols for handling tips regarding potential misuse of funds, misrepresentation of disability severity, or failure to report income or assets. When such a tip is received, especially if it contains specific dates, locations, or names, the VA is legally obligated to open a review to determine the veracity of the claim. This review process is instant and entirely unannounced to the veteran, often starting with the VA quietly gathering external evidence, cross-referencing public records, or initiating a focused data pull. The first time the veteran knows about it is when they receive a letter requesting documentation that seems entirely unrelated to their current benefits, perhaps asking for proof of residency, detailed employment history from a specific time period, or even requiring a specialized immediate C&P exam focusing only on the disputed aspect of their disability. The review is unexpected because it is driven by a third party's agenda, not the VA's schedule. The emotional toll of this trigger is immense because it injects suspicion and external conflict into the relationship between the veteran and the VA. If you find yourself facing an unrequested review that seems to focus on an extremely specific, non-routine aspect of your life or disability, something that doesn't fit the typical data audit or scheduled re-exam, it is highly probable that an external tip initiated the process. The best defense is to maintain impeccable records and, crucially, to never misrepresent the severity of your condition or your financial status, regardless of who might be watching. When responding to this type of review, veterans must be hyper-vigilant about the scope of the inquiry, ensuring they only provide information directly relevant to the specific allegation rather than opening up their entire file for unnecessary scrutiny. The VA often treats these whistleblower tips with extreme seriousness, understanding that while many tips are malicious or unfounded, those that are accurate represent a failure in the system's oversight. The investigation resulting from a tip is often more intrusive and demanding than a standard administrative review, sometimes involving interviews with third parties or requests for documentation that extends far beyond the typical scope of AII disability claim. The veteran needs to approach this type of review not just as an administrative task, but as a legal defense of their integrity and established benefits. Sixth on our list is the geographic change or foreign residency review. For the vast majority of veterans living within the United States, moving across state lines is usually a simple address change. However, for certain benefits, and especially for veterans who move overseas or change their primary residence frequently, this geographic shift is a massive, immediate trigger for an unrequested review. The VA needs to know where you are for several critical reasons: healthcare access, regional office jurisdiction, and most importantly, currency and benefit rates for foreign residents. If the VA receives notification that your primary address has changed to an international location, the system instantly initiates a review to ensure compliance with foreign residency rules. These rules can affect the amount of compensation due to currency exchange rates and the cost of living index in that country, and the availability of VA medical care. The review is unannounced because the VA needs to verify the legitimacy of the move and ensure they are not overpaying or underpaying based on the new location's specific financial metrics. Furthermore, certain benefits, particularly those involving specialized care or fiduciary arrangements, are highly dependent on the veteran residing in a specific, verifiable location. If the VA detects frequent address changes, or if mail is consistently returned as undeliverable, the system flags the file for a residency verification review. This is often an aggressive process because the VA must ensure the veteran is alive, competent, and receiving the benefits directly. The review may start with a simple request for proof of residency, utility bills, lease agreements, etc., but if not satisfied, it can escalate to mandatory in-person verification or even the temporary suspension of benefits until the veteran's location is confirmed. For veterans who travel extensively or maintain multiple residences, this geographic trigger is a constant threat. The best way to preempt this is to notify the VA immediately of any address change, domestic or international, and to ensure that your mailing address is always reliable, even if you are temporarily staying elsewhere. Failure to maintain accurate contact information is one of the quickest ways to trigger an unannounced and potentially damaging review process. When moving overseas, the complexities multiply exponentially. The VA needs detailed banking information for international transfers, and the review must confirm the veteran's status under foreign tax and residency laws, ensuring there are no conflicts with U.S. benefit regulations. This geographic review is often a multi-agency effort, sometimes involving the State Department or the Treasury Department, adding layers of complexity that far exceed a simple change of address form. Finally, we arrive at the seventh trigger: The Random Quality Control Check, the VA's internal review cycle. This is the one that truly feels like winning the lottery in the worst possible way. The VA is a massive government organization subject to internal audits, congressional oversight, and quality control mandates. To ensure accuracy and consistency across regional offices, the VA periodically selects a random sample of files for a comprehensive top-to-bottom quality control review. These files are pulled regardless of the veteran's rating, age, or claim history. They are simply part of a statistically valid sample designed to test the integrity of the VA's decision-making process. The goal of this review is not necessarily to find fault with the veteran, but to find fault with the VA's previous actions. Did the initial rating decision follow all procedures? Was the evidence properly weighed? Was the compensation calculated correctly? However, the unintended consequence for the veteran is that this internal quality check often results in an unrequested review of their benefits. If the quality control specialist finds an error, perhaps the original rating officer misinterpreted a regulation or failed to consider a specific piece of evidence, the VA is obligated to correct that error. This correction can sometimes lead to a proposed reduction in benefits if the specialist determines the original rating was too generous based on a misapplication of the rating schedule. Conversely, it might lead to an increase, but the review process itself starts without warning and often without a clear explanation to the veteran that they are merely part of an internal audit. The letter received by the veteran might simply state that the VA is reviewing your file for accuracy, which does little to quell the anxiety. You cannot prevent being selected for a random quality control check. It is purely statistical. However, knowing that this possibility exists underscores the necessity of having impeccable documentation and ensuring that every claim you have ever filed is supported by clear, concise medical evidence. If your file is selected for this internal audit, the best defense is to cooperate fully, and if a negative finding is proposed, immediately consult with a VSO or accredited representative to challenge the finding based on the original evidence, reminding the VA that the error lies in their initial interpretation, not in the veteran's condition. The randomness of this trigger is perhaps the most frustrating aspect for veterans, as it introduces an element of pure chance into the stability of their benefits. A veteran who has meticulously managed their file for decades can suddenly find themselves under intense scrutiny simply because a computer algorithm selected their file for a statistically significant sample size. The duration of these quality control reviews can also be prolonged, as they often involve multiple layers of supervisory review, leaving the veteran in limbo for months while the VA meticulously examines every historical decision made regarding their service connection and rating percentages. So, where does this leave you? The landscape of VA benefits is not a static field. It is a complex, interconnected system, constantly running checks and balances. The 7 triggers we've discussed, the silent audit, the medical milestone, the income bomb, the dependent shift, the anonymous tip, the geographic change, and the random quality check, all share one fundamental characteristic. They initiate a review of your livelihood without your explicit request or even your knowledge. They are the gears grinding behind the scenes of the bureaucracy. Protecting yourself against these unannounced reviews requires a shift in mindset from passive recipient to active manager of your VA file. This means treating every interaction, every piece of mail, and every change in your life as a potential trigger point. Be meticulous in your record keeping. Be consistent in your reporting across all federal agencies. And most importantly, never ignore a request for documentation, even if it seems confusing or arbitrary. When that plain brown envelope arrives and you feel that familiar dread, remember these triggers. Instead of panicking, identify which trigger likely pulled your file and respond to the VA with precision and confidence, knowing exactly why they are asking and what evidence they are truly seeking. Stability in the VA system is not guaranteed by your rating. It is maintained by your vigilance. Stay informed, stay prepared, and protect the benefits you earned. If you found this deep dive into the hidden mechanics of the VA review process helpful, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe for more comprehensive guides on navigating the complexities of veterans' benefits. We'll see you in the next video.